Welcome to Indiana Sports Beat Radio, presented by Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Know your role and shut your mouth, you jabroni!
Fires upfield into the end zone. It is caught. Jelani Woods, touchdown! INDY!
Yes!
43-point night for Tyrese Halliburton.
How do you like that, partner?
Renew now, drives in low, throws up a shot. It doesn't go. Tipped up and in by Anthony Leal. Indiana takes the lead.
It's pretty simple. I win. Google me.
Now, here's your host, Jim Coyle.
Hello, everybody, and welcome into a windy Wednesday. Hopefully the winds are gone. Jim Coyle with you as always. Dylan Sinn from the Fort Wayne Journal-Gazette joining us today. Kyle Neddenriep from the Indy Star. Rick Bozich as well. John, the producer, keeping us between the white lines. And Dylan, what was the weather like last night up in Fort Wayne for our listeners on 1380 The Fan?
We did okay. I heard you guys had some weather down there in Bloomington. We did okay up here. I covered it. I covered this game last night, and there was no problem. They played a full 9 and didn't have any issues. So there was some thunder, a little bit of lightning later on, but other than that, it was okay.
I had to go see our good friend Dr. J down at Reynolds Family Dentistry in Sellersburg. Had a filling or something, a piece of a filling fall out, and it was dancing. I was doing some dancing for a couple of weeks, but he took care of me. It was the easiest dental procedure I think I've ever had. I told him that. Got to see his dad, Roger. Great people, great family. As I'm driving back, it was about 5. I was hitting the Salem area, Indiana, which is in southern Indiana. And it was blacker than what was the Bulls took us on a moonless night. See if anybody gets that reference. It was just black. The skies were black, and I was like, "Oh crap!" And I was like, "What am I driving into?" Because I was like heading right toward. Looked like I was out in Kansas, and nothing. I never really experienced any bad weather, some rain, but I get to back to Bloomington, and it's like a tornado zone. I mean, there were trees down everywhere, big trees uprooted, and I'm like, "Wow, that takes some serious wind." So, and it was all over the place. So it was mind-boggling. Power was out. Places we lost power, had to go around resetting all the clocks. This one's still jacked up, but yeah, some rough weather. Hope everyone's okay. I haven't, I went to bed and I haven't seen anything as far as being a tornado or anything. It's just high winds, but man, the damage is amazing that it left behind.
Yeah. Wow. That's I heard a little bit about that yesterday when just kind of word of mouth that Bloomington had gotten some pretty rough weather. And so, yeah, hopefully everyone's okay down there. It's kind of that time of year where mostly it's just hot, but every once in a while something crazy happens. So yeah, hopefully everyone's okay and feeling good down in Bloomington now that that's passed a little bit.
Yeah, actually, Bloomington had a couple of storms yesterday. The first one happened while we were doing the show, and so we didn't really cover it. We mentioned it a little bit, but I ended up being asked to come on Dan Dockich's show yesterday and to talk about it. And of course, you know what I'm probably talking about. The acrimonious split between Indiana and one of their supportive NIL cooperatives, I guess you'd say. But that was the talk of the town, which it's kind of funny in a way that this does neither of them any good, in my opinion, but both kind of had a faction of people that could see this is not quite right on how this goes. And I'm talking both parties here. it's just not a good look. I can't wait to talk to Rick. He put a piece out specifically talking about why does Indiana just keep poking itself in the eye, in essence. And that's not far off. It seems like that is the case.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where it's off season. It's the off season, right? It's one of those things where there's not a whole lot going on. The transfer portal season is over. The rosters are set. We're kind of just killing time until football season starts, really. And so we're looking for content as kind of an IU media sphere, and something like that when it happens, it's going to draw outsized attention. And so, yeah, it's an unfortunate situation, but I have trouble reading too much into it about a deeper meaning into it about what the program is or its propensity for causing drama or anything like that, just because it's the summer. If this happened during the season, we'd have 17 other things to talk about and it'd be 18th on the list. But now the problem is that there's not a whole lot else going on because the NBA is over, the NHL is over. And there's no college sports, there's no transfer portal, and so we're all looking for something to talk about, and so this ends up at the top of the list. And so, yeah, it's an unfortunate situation. I'm sure that both parties wish that it had gone a different way, but it is what it is.
Yeah, and for people who think that they're being left out in the cold, that Indiana has just decided to cancel all these events. That's not how I read into it personally. I read into it as a divorce of a relationship that was actually built on some rocky terms to begin with. It happened to coincide with the onset of NIL. And I think it gave someone the opportunity to be close to the program, if that makes sense, and do something that would take a little burden off of IU and say, okay, if you want to do that, take it on. And they started doing it. They did not invent, or he did not invent, fantasy camps. As a matter of fact, those fantasy camps were all run by the same company that runs them all over the country for Kentucky, for Kansas, for Duke, for the New York Yankees. It's called pro camps. That's what they do. So I would be surprised, if not shocked, if something like that does not still happen this year. And the same for the Fan Fest thing. This was not a new invention, people. And just because one has been canceled does not mean that there is not going to be another. I would, again, be a little surprised if there's not something put together, especially with Indiana is probably doing what they should have done a long time ago, in my opinion. They're as much to blame as anybody in that situation, because they're the one that gave that situation legs. They gave that fire oxygen to continue to move, to live. So, and then when that oxygen is shut off like it was, poof, it goes away. They should have done that a long time ago. I think that they put confusion in the heads of fans, but what it was, you've got the real collective Hoosiers for Good, who are bringing in and are bringing in millions of dollars, the real money, the money that gets these players here. And then you've got another group that is conveniently at the time doing these other things that they didn't have time to do, because they were landing big fish. So they didn't have time to go fishing in the pond, which was perfect. It was so it worked hand in hand. But now I think that Hoosiers for Good is more than entrenched. They have Hoosiers Connect going which is more along the way of where you would see the fan fest than where I would expect to see a fan fest type of event. And it should be under the auspices of Indiana. I have always asked, why does Indiana not run their own damn fantasy camp? I mean, because you reach out to the guy that does the fantasy camp. That's who actually puts on the fantasy camp. So there's so much that people don't know. So there's a phrase that I always like to use, and this goes for me too, people. But you don't know what you don't know. That is a key. I know what I know, but I also know there are things that I don't know. And I know, Dylan, it's the same for you.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And yeah, it is. It's one of those things where we don't know everything that goes on behind the scenes in these situations. Especially with the world of NIL, which is so opaque. Like I think it's one of those things where there hasn't been. I mean, obviously, there's been really good reporting over the years on collectives and things like that. And there's obviously some knowledge of what Hoosiers for Good does, what Hoosiers Connect does, and how all of that and the work they do in public. Obviously.
And another thing is Hoosiers for Good, pardon me for interrupting, is they're not out making all these videos portraying themselves as doing this and doing that. They're just doing the work
right
at the highest level, where that was not the case in the other direction. And I think fans got well, I know they did. The ones that followed got a distorted view and an incorrect view of the value between the two. It's not close. One was a tricycle, the other one's a truck. That's, I'm just saying in difference, that's what it was like.
And that's one of those things where we just don't know, because we don't know how much these players get in NIL. We don't know how the negotiations happen. We don't know who's really in the room, other than obviously Mike Woodson and maybe some other athletic department officials. But it's one of those things where it's such an opaque process, kind of by necessity, right? You can't just be out here negotiating in public with these players, because that's just kind of not how this works. And it's not going to help recruiting. And so it's one of those things where you kind of have to have some of this happen behind closed doors. But because it happens behind closed doors, I think people are a little bit confused about the process. And maybe we should have more transparency with it. Maybe that's something the NCAA should look into is transparency. And maybe they will when they put together some of these new NIL rules. But it's just one of those things where it's really hard, as recruiting has always been. It's really hard to give fans a clear picture of what's going on. And sometimes that causes misconceptions.
Well, and another thing that sticks out, and I say this in with some fear of I hope there's no retribution, because there's no malice intended. But my job is to be a reporter. I'm not an IU cheerleader, people. We do a lot of IU content, but that's not my job. That's not Dylan's job. That's the difference of actually being in the media, is trying to always maintain a point of neutrality. But something that also not only bothers me, but should bother a lot of people, is the fact that of the involvement of Mike Whitson's family potentially getting jobs or internships out in LA with this group, via that group. I don't think that should be the case. That's like, guys in Washington, their kids getting a job through some donor or super PAC or something that's just not quite above board, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, it's one of those things where we don't really do it. It's so hard to know exactly what's going on. The problem with this situation is we're getting one side of the story, right? And that's, as reporters, the whole thing would be, we need both sides in order to write a good story, right? And we only have one side of the story right now.
Because there are always how many sides?
multiple. It's not just two. There's three.
Well,
there's four.
There's always
five.
three sides.
Yeah.
At least three sides to every story.
Right.
Yours, his, and the truth, baby.
That's right. And so, of course, we're only getting one side right now, and that's part of the problem is that we're probably never going to get the other side because this is not something that Mike Woodson should be speaking on publicly. It's just not. That's
another thing. Why this ever Mike Woodson didn't do it. I don't know why they chose to do this in a poor form other than to get more attention.
Right. And that's the thing is Mike Woodson will never speak on this publicly because he knows that he's not supposed to speak on it publicly. Right. Like this is a conversation that was had in private. And now we know one side of the conversation basically. And so it's an unfortunate situation. It really is. I do think that it's one of those things where if it happened during the season, we wouldn't be talking about it quite so much. But, it's the summer.
I don't know about this one would probably have some legs, I think, just because of the just how if it's me, but this I don't think that way. I'm not making another video or whatever about it and trying to turn it in, trying to do a situation about it.
Sure.
It just can't be that easy. It has to, there has to be something. So we've got to take a break. We've got plenty more coming up. Dylan Sinn from the Fort Wayne Journal-Gazette is with us on this Wednesday. We'll have Kyle Neddenriep from the Indy Star later, as well as Rick Bozich. Back with more, brought to you by Andy Moore Honda. Of course, get the best in new and used vehicles at andymoorehonda.com. And the Autograph app, where real fans get unreal rewards. Go to Apple app or Google Play Store today. Use the ISB media code to download that. Get all of your similar content in one spot. That lets them know that you heard it here. We're back with more right after this.
We'll be right back for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
In the market.
All right.
I love this. This is my favorite. I gotta try to remember that. Well, I'm gonna leave that up till we come back, John.
That's fun.
Hello, Chris. How's it going in Watton? It looks a bit like the bloody British over here today. Very cloudy. I can do a British accent, but I can't do an Irish accent where the crap and I'm Irish.
Oh, gosh.
Irish accent is the best accent over there. There's some of those Britons, boy. It's funny. It depends on where they come from. Some of them are clear as rain, as clear as a blue sky, and then there's others. It's like, what? It's like listening to somebody from Louisiana. I'm like, what'd they say?
Yeah.
That's English. What so have you been looking at anything other than besides like tin caps and stuff like that?
Yeah,
like I said, Xavier Robinson, like I mentioned on him. What did I? Let me pull that piece back up. Yeah, I think he's a Notre Dame guy.
He released his top 5 the other day. Notre Dame was on there.
But I think that he ends up at Notre Dame. I look at the schools that he's got up there, and I'm like, dude, Micah Shrewsbury is working his ass off. Notre Dame is in on every recruit right now.
Yeah, I mean they're top 5 for Sicily. They're top 5 for Sicily too. I think I saw Malachi Moreno put Notre Dame in his top 8. Obviously, IU's in there as well.
Yeah, I think that Malachi is. It's.
He's probably a Kentucky guy at this point, would be my guess. But
Kentucky, Indiana, Arkansas is my top 3 for him.
Okay, all right.
You got Calipari, of course. And Indiana's got a shot because of Sicily and Harrelson, but
Yeah.
Here we go, guys. 20 seconds.
thing you need to make a Gordon.
Are you leaving that comment up, by the way? I know you switched comments. Not that it's a big deal. Just
I like the tomato one.
Chop Shop Market and Table, a part of the Wild Food Group, is your butcher, baker, and fish house, no matter where you live.
This segment is brought to you by the Chop Shop, home of the Indiana football and men's basketball coaches shows. Welcome back to Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back. Indiana Sports Beat Radio on this Wednesday. Thank you so much for being with us. Dylan Sinn from the Fort Wayne Journal-Gazette along with the ride. We had a bunch of, we had some weather situation. Had a situation last night, as well as I know the peeps down in southern Indiana, Evansville. Yeah, man, it was something. I'm telling you, I was shocked when I got back to Bloomington. I just missed it somehow, and I'm grateful because, I mean, there was stuff everywhere, man. It was everywhere. Robert says, bringing it back to ground zero, baby. On a lighter note, the green tomatoes are turning red, so you better get them now if you want to fry some of those up. Gritty's tomatoes are going crazy. Once they turn yellow, she'll be giving them away. So we've got a tomato giveaway coming up. No, I'm kidding, here on Indiana Sports Beat Radio. Chris says it's cooler here in England, much less humid. I don't think they say the H in any word, do they?
Jim, maybe you should stick to speaking American English there. Your accent could use some work, I think.
Well, so which one? The American one or the British one? 'Cause I think they both could probably use some work without question. Just trying to go through some of the comments here. I want to get off of the subject but the last thing, and because I'll talk about this with Rick Bozich as well. He had a piece out yesterday that was kind of, telling it like it is in regards to this. Came down to Mike Woodson being upset about Brian Evans being a guest on a podcast we did a post-game show with Brian and Joe Hillman that, let me tell you, made everything else pale in comparison, in my opinion, as far as letting their feelings known. But fortunately, we weren't one of the ones that were being hand-delivered in first interviews. We weren't the ones being given insider information. And that's a yes, you did, Justin. Slipped that one in. I'm glad you caught that. I'm gonna start doing that every day and make a contest out of it. But it's all pettiness. It all comes down to pettiness on both sides, and that's why it just makes it just a dumb look. But outside of it, nobody cares. Outside of the Indiana sphere, nobody cares. This is soap opera stuff. But it is what it is.
It's off-season fodder. It doesn't really affect what's on the court. I think is the important thing here. I think that's the number one thing, is that Indiana is going to play basketball in the fall, and they have a roster set, and it's a pretty exciting roster. We can focus on that. It's
Indiana football.
I'm
going to talk about Indiana football.
Yeah.
And not just Indiana.
Indiana
and Purdue, both in the same day or close to it, flipped a player committed elsewhere. Purdue flips a wide receiver from Louisville, which is more than surprising to me because they have recently former Purdue coach Jeff Brom, who is an offensive type of guru, who throws the ball. Purdue is coached by a defensive coach. But their OC is a guy that's kind of through the Mike Lynch system, so maybe they're kind of getting their sea legs. But they flip a guy, and that's a big deal. Indiana, on the other hand, which does something that's more important, I think. They flipped 2025 wide receiver Davion Chandler from Illinois to Indiana. I think that the buzz that Kurt Cignetti and crew have created it just continues. They have been landing commitments left and right here. And more importantly, he's an in-state recruit. And if you get any in-state, like 3-star types, they do. They don't get many of the 4 and none of the 5 stars. But Davion played at Lawrence North. Plays at Lawrence North. He's good. He was one of the top guys around last year. That's a big deal. Bringing in and starting to secure in-state talent is something Indiana has just not done a good job of, because if players were the few upper level elite players the state has produced, they're like, hell, I've got an offer from Ohio State. I've got an offer from Michigan, wherever the case may be. It wasn't going to be Indiana, and I understand that. But I think this first season is going to be so important. It's truly going to change it could. And I can't believe I've never talked so positively about an upcoming season for Indiana football. And it's not because of a lack of desire. It just wasn't there. And, you look at the schedule, Dylan, and a 6-0 start is absolutely not out of the question. And I know how crazy that sounds. The likelihood of it happening is probably not there. That makes 5-1 all the more likely. But regardless, that is a great possibility. And if they're able to go 5-1 to start the season, much less 6-0, things are going to be really, the buzz is just going to start spinning faster. But that is going to lead to better commitments. And Indiana is very much in the hunt for Julian Lewis, the number 1 recruit and quarterback in the country. Indiana is one of the final 2 schools. And I that's the information I have been given. And I heard that somewhere else also, there's someone. So I'm not the only person who understands that. And I saw someone that kind of explained it a little bit better. I think USC is out with him. I think it's Indiana and Auburn. But the deal with Auburn is they're going to have probably a couple of guys like Juju Lewis when he's there or when he gets there. Indiana, while having a really good quarterbacks room, is not going to have probably the same talent. Definitely won't have the same type of talent that Auburn does at the moment. But I think that they can quickly get there. The fact that the offensive line has really taken a couple of clicks up under Mike Bosted, the only coach that Kurt Cignetti kept on this entire staff, tells you something right there. The running backs room, the offense is just going to be solid. A lot less mistakes is what I expect this year. And because of that, I think that it's going to make it very attractive to someone like Julian Lewis, who doesn't matter where he goes. He knows he's going to get the tutelage because he's got the relationship. That's why Indiana's in the position they are with him.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing is that, like if you look on, I use just looking at On3 right now, for example. I know you're a Rivals guy, Mike, so I apologize. But right now, the 5 schools even listed on his page in terms of schools that have a chance are USC, Georgia, Auburn, Alabama, and IU. That's one of those things is not like the other. In terms of just the history there, and so it matters that IU is even in the race there, right? Because They had him on campus. It seems like they really impressed him when he visited there. They seem like obviously they want him, but it's one of those things where it's just good to have your name in the conversation with a recruit like that, right? Especially if you're IU, who has not gotten recruits at that level for a long time and almost never, basically. And and what that does is it helps you get guys who are not quite as highly touted but see the buzz, right? And that's part of what we saw yesterday with Davion Chandler, who committed, a Lawrence North guy, I believe, who flipped from Illinois to IU. And I saw something funny, which was that someone tweeted a picture of Eric Gordon, and he retweeted it.
That is so funny because
good.
I thought of that immediately.
Yeah.
And it's the same reason. It's the same exact reason. When Eric Gordon decommitted to Illinois and committed back to Indiana, it was simply because Indiana had fired Mike Davis and had hired Kelvin Sampson. That was what it's about. Illinois and the Ludu, they go berserk and acted like that this is just the greatest heist in the history of the world, and carried this thing on in Illinois. I'm like going, hey, idiots, you realize he's from Indiana, right? You realize he probably wanted to play at Indiana, the school that is with the history, but just wasn't going to go there because the situation wasn't correct. And the situation changed. But boy, did they whine. I'm like, man, they must have went through a lot of cheese with that wine.
Yeah, they went through it back then. I remember that as someone who lived in Illinois. That was, I mean, even as I was 12 at the time, that was a huge deal. But no, Davion Chandler, he's a wide receiver from Lawrence North. IU has a wide receiver from Lawrence North on their team right now who is among the best in the entire Big Ten. Like that's something to watch. And a guy who, by the way, put his name in the transfer portal when Curt Cignetti got hired, and Curt Cignetti convinced him to come back. Right? Like that is a heck of an example to follow. If you're Davion Chandler and you're looking at, well, what's Donovan McCulley, who's in the exact same situation I am, what's he doing? Well, he thought about leaving. He decided, no, I'd rather be here and play for this coaching staff. That's a huge deal for IU, right?
Absolutely.
And so it seems like, by the way, there's more commitments coming because IU just finished their official visit time. Official visit time is over now. The dead period has started.
They've been landing commitments left and right.
Yeah, and it seems like there's more to come. And so there's it's a pretty exciting time for IU football, and we shouldn't shortchange Purdue either. I know this is mostly an IU show. You're based in Bloomington, but the receiver that Purdue got,
we talk about it all. We talk about Notre Dame and whatever there is to talk about.
The receiver Purdue got, LeBron Hill, is also an Indiana guy from Hammond. And
now, I think that was a bigger flip, and personally,
absolutely.
Because getting him away, like I said earlier, from Jeff Brom, who that's what he does, man. And so, it's that to me that was more and surprising. You know, Indiana or Purdue was really wonky last year under this coach. The offense was up and down. I don't know what they have really as far as quarterback. I haven't followed them close enough yet.
They have Hudson Card, who is going to be the starter this year, but he won't be there. This is his last year of eligibility, so he won't be there for LeBron Hill. They have a guy coming in. Last weekend they got Oscar Rios, who is a top 10 quarterback recruit in the 2026 class. And then they have Marcos Davila, who is a 4-star kid in 2024, also signed. So that's those two guys are the future at the position. I assume that Davila is not going to, maybe he'll be ready next year. Maybe they feel he will be, but I would assume they go to transfer portal hunting for a quarterback this coming off season because Card will be out of eligibility. But Card was really good last year. I wouldn't say really good. I'd say he got better as the season went on, and by the end of the season, it seemed like he had a real grasp of the offense and was really comfortable. The problem was that he was hurt for a good portion of the season. I think he's going to be pretty good this year. I think the offense should be good as a result. Obviously, losing Deion Burks, their best wide receiver, to Oklahoma as a transfer hurts. but I think that offense is set up to be pretty good. And so I think that'll be a pretty good kind of showcase of what Graham Harrell, the offensive coordinator you mentioned from the Mike Leach tree, I think that's going to be a pretty good showcase of what he does. So I think, if we talked about this last week, for as much buzz as IU has, I think justifiably so, I think they're going to be pretty good this year. I think it's pretty exciting. I think Purdue is going to take a step forward as well. I would not be surprised if Purdue is also a bowl team this year, which is obviously significantly better than they were last year. And even last year, they took significant steps forward as the season went on, and Ryan Walters learned what it is to be a head coach. And so I think it's much quieter, but I do think there's justifiable buzz for Purdue as well because there's some talent on that team.
Absolutely. Dylan Sinn from the Fort Wayne Journal-Gazette. Stay dry and warm and all that up there in Fort Wayne. Hello to everybody on 1380 The Fan. Make sure you stay tuned after Indiana Sports Beat Radio for the Sports Rush. And we've got lots more coming back. Brought to you by our friends Cheryl Sizemore and Remax Realty. If you're in the market for a home in the Indianapolis area, reach out to Cheryl. Could be the difference between getting the home you want or not. You can find her at Cheryl at IndyHomePros.com. We're back with more after this.
We'll be right back for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
If you're looking for a...
All right, thank you, Dylan.
All right. Thanks, gentlemen.
Hey, brother, thank you. Appreciate you.
All right. I will see you guys next week.
Yes, sir.
All right.
All right.
Rolling.
Just a heads up, Jim. The next break is the hard break. I know it might be confusing based on when we started today.
That's what I was looking at. How long is this segment?
This one it's still regular time. It's about 17-ish minutes. So yeah, once we hit the 9, basically when it's about time for Rick, that's when it's time to break. And I let Kyle know we were ready for him.
Really?
I know.
Come on, man. I clicked on your clip from
from yesterday.
And I was like, what in the hell are they talking about?
We don't do it every episode, but every couple of episodes we do town name trivia, and I just give each of them 2 options between a fake town and a real town in a different state. This past time was Florida.
Practice. All right, give it to me.
I'll give you the ones I did last week. I need to pull up my list. Actually, I don't even have many more. Here's one. So Florida, one of these is a real town name and one of them isn't. Frostproof or Perma-Snow?
Frostproof.
That would have been correct. And I would have hit the buzzer. And they were trying to cheat last week. It was pretty funny.
See, I knocked it out of the park. Didn't cheat. Don't need to cheat. You're gonna have to have me on.
Okay.
I'm gonna have to make a command appearance.
Excuse me. All right, I'm not sure about Kyle, but I'm figuring he'll be on momentarily. Usually he lets me know when he's not going to be on. So,
and that would be great if I wish to God we had the time after the show to do the extended hour or whatever, or extended time period and just BS.
Here we go. 10 seconds. I'll pull Kyle in just a moment.
The Ridge Line. Go to AndyMooreHonda.com and get more to your door.
This segment is brought to you by Freethink Apparel. Welcome back to Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Welcome back to Indiana Sports Beat Radio here on this Wacky Wednesday as we're putting the storms behind us. Kyle Neddenriep from the Indy Star joins us. Kyle, how are you, sir?
Good. How you doing, Jim?
Can't complain. Nobody wants to listen to it. But did you guys get any storms in the Indy area last night?
We got some rain, but not really. It was kind of intermittent. I was kind of inside actually when we got most of that rain for work. But yeah, we got some. Didn't look like we got what they got in Southern Indiana though.
I'm telling you, brother, it was ironically, I was in what I call Southern Indiana. Had to go down to the dentist yesterday. See our good friend Jay down at Reynolds Family Dentistry. On my way back, I hit the Salem area, and man, it was black. That sky he was mean, my friend. He was angry. He was angry like an old man trying to send soup back in a deli. But it was black. But I didn't really go any bad weather. Then once I reached Bloomington, I'm like, what the hell? It looked like a bomb went off. Big old trees down everywhere, limbs all over the place. And I'm like, wow. I'm talking like some really sizable trees uprooted, laying across a building, blocking roads everywhere. That had to be just short of an F0 tornado.
Yeah, those are sometimes those winds are, it might be even just in a little area, but it's not necessarily a tornado, but those winds can do serious damage. Obviously, those trees and falling on houses. I saw a little bit of that in Bloomington, just online or whatever. But yeah, it didn't look good. I was actually like early afternoon, kind of sitting outside with someone, and it's like, man, we better. All of a sudden it kind of got windy. We didn't get, I was kind of on the south side of Indianapolis. We didn't get what you guys got, but it was you could tell it was starting to get a little touch and go there.
A little suspect. Indiana football has been raking in the commitments, Kyle. And I was talking just a bit ago with Dylan Sinn about how you can see the groundswell of this buzz that has been created by the arrival of Kurt Cignetti, and how it's starting to permeate throughout the state with the talent in the state. And while Indiana is not a state that produces an abundant sea of upper level elite talent, not a ton of 5 stars. Indiana has never landed a 5-star. But they're starting to get the home guys. Davian Chandler flips from Illinois to Indiana. Purdue also got a guy to flip a homegrown product from Hammond to flip from Louisville yesterday as well. So, but the news for Indiana, to me, that's a message. I'm like, all right, that resonated with these guys enough to make that change. And I think that's going to continue and will just continue to grow. But what is Indiana getting in Davion Chandler?
Well, they're getting a guy who's he's a playmaker. I mean, he's fast. He's not necessarily big. He's about 6 foot, 170. So, he's not a McCulley type of receiver, not that 6'5", 6'4", 6'5" type of guy, but he will. I mean, I always think the thing about him is, his speed stands out certainly, and he's a guy who can run by you, and he will. He stretches the field, but also, he can go up and get a ball in traffic, and you see that a lot with him. Is he's not afraid. I think he's still, just this past year, I was actually talking to him about this yesterday, but, his sophomore year probably wasn't what he thought it was going to be. I think he had 260 receiving yards or something like that. And then really went off last year and had, 40 catches and almost 800 yards, 13 touchdowns out of those 40 catches. So, that is a high percentage of touchdowns per reception. And they had a good quarterback who was, but not necessarily a great passing quarterback. Montez Jones was their quarterback, and he was more of kind of a dual threat type of quarterback who also he played some receiver too. So I am curious this year, just from his perspective of what he does. They have a guy who's going to be their quarterback who's maybe more of a pocket style passer. So, from that standpoint, I'm interested to see maybe what he looks like in more of a college type of a quarterback. So, but yeah, I mean he's very I'd say his confidence has gone up a lot since he had that great year. He's a guy he wants to take everything to the end zone. I mean that's sort of the mentality that he has as a receiver, and he does that obviously quite a bit. But with him, I think it was he committed to Illinois on his visit earlier this month. But I think even through all that, he had a good relationship with IU leading up to that point and afterwards, and he still took his official visit obviously to IU and decided to change his mind. But he's been there, he said he's been there 6 times, I believe. So very familiar with the program. So he good relationship with his position coach with Coach Signetti, and he said he felt just like he was at home with everybody from on down the line to the even the other position coaches. So it seems like a good situation for IU to bring him in, and also for him. And I mean, I think when you talk about him, he's a guy who can do a lot, do a lot of everything, and his speed will match up with some of the top guys you see from anywhere. And sometimes that, you mentioned about, sometimes the IU or the Indiana recruits maybe are not as, and there isn't, you're right. I mean, there's not as many of them as some other areas like Ohio or whatever. But, I think that's an area of speed. Sometimes the Indiana kids don't have that real breakaway speed sometimes, but I think he's a guy who, he's going to match up with a lot of other players from anywhere in the country in that way. And I just think he's got a lot of ball skills. He's not like he's just a speed guy. He's got good hand-eye coordination, good, he'll go up and get it, like I said. And I think the best is ahead for him.
Yeah. And I've talked a lot about, not a lot with you though, but Indiana football has now had the #1 recruit in the country on campus for a visit. That's something Indiana basketball has never accomplished, which is amazing, considering the history of both programs. But not only that, Kyle, Julian Lewis, from all indications, Indiana is one of his final 2 schools, which the shock factor that would reverberate if they were able to land him. And I think it's a very real chance. I think it might be better than 50-50, but it's 50-50 at the worst, I believe. And the shockwaves, the ripples that would send through recruiting for this program would be, I don't know that you can put it into words. You probably,
yeah, I mean, this is always a time where if you can, you have momentum on your side, or you have, I don't know, you have time on your side, but things are just starting, everything's fresh, everything's new. So now is the time to kind of capitalize, or, the time is obviously after you have a good season to capitalize. Early in a coaching tenure, you don't always have that, so yeah, obviously, if you can bring in guys who are, big time, like Lewis is, by all indications, he's a 5-star. So, if you can do that, obviously you're getting somewhere. And, we've seen it with other, if you can get quarterbacks who have, that kind of gravitas, then everything kind of follows that, I would say. It's we've seen it with other programs throughout the country. I know, like when Nebraska got the Raiola, got him away from Georgia, they got a lot of, other recruits falling in line, or you just get visits from players you probably wouldn't even get usually a sniff from. So it just sort of changes all the, changes everything about what you're doing if you can get that big time quarterback in.
Yeah. And not only that, like I mentioned earlier, Indiana has never landed ever a 5-star player in football. And breaking through that threshold would do the same thing that we saw when they had not landed a 4-star or they had landed very, very few. And then a couple of years ago, boy, you looked in the column and it was vastly different. The talent had grown, and which it has to be that way. If you're going to compete in the heavyweight division, you better have some heavyweights. And that is what leads to that along with winning, because Indiana did not follow up with the momentum they had gained in 2020. They come into that 2021 season. The expectations are just off the charts, as they should have been. And then they lay a golden egg. And I think about this all the time, and it drives me insane, because I was part of the problem with everybody thinking that it was Nick Sheridan, the offensive coordinator. It was like, what the hell? Because Kalen DeBoer left, and then it looks like the wheels fell off. But it turned out that it wasn't Nick Sheridan, who is currently the OC at Alabama. It was the offensive line coach, who Tom Allen just would not get rid of because they were too good of buddies. Eventually that situation got taken care of, but it killed momentum. And Indiana had that opportunity to continue to build, but I think that they'll do that again under Curt Cignetti, and I don't think that there will be a turnaround to come back.
Yeah, it's just like I said, you just have to have, and it works the other way too. You kind of catch that wave like they did in 2020. That didn't always come back, and so when you do get it, you got to build on it and take advantage of it. Get those guys in there and get them to commit. And obviously, easier said than done. But you only have that, especially at a program like IU, where you're not Ohio State, where it's just kind of every year's the same. In a good way, it's you got to catch that wave and really be able to capitalize on it. And then you get yourself on you can start stacking some seasons of, bowl seasons, and all of a sudden you're in a different conversation. Like we've seen some Big Ten programs that maybe aren't the top level been able to sustain that. Going way back to I remember with Barry Alvarez in the 90s with Wisconsin they were not a great program at all, and then, they kind of build that momentum, obviously a different time than we're in now, but yeah, I mean, you got to build it the right way, and it's a different way now than it used to be, but it feels like now they got a little bit of that going on.
Yeah. And Indiana, while they don't produce a ton of, high level elite football talent, they produce the talent. DeJuan Jones. I mean, I can think back that when he played in the national championship, who did he play against from Cathedral right across the line?
Yeah. Emil Ekiyor from Cathedral.
Yeah. I mean, that's nuts. So that shows you, there's football talent. This is not just a basketball state. What's next for you, brother?
Oh man, I've been doing a lot of basketball. I had basically all weekend with the Charlie Hughes, so people can check out. I wrote quite a bit on players I saw, a couple other things. So I still got a couple stories I'm writing on that. I actually got one on Noah Washington, who's an incoming freshman at New Albany. Talked to him, watched him play a couple times this weekend, and pretty impressive young man and player. So looking forward to seeing him throughout the next 4 years. Wrote on Jeffersonville. Their great weekend they had. So you can check all that out, indystar.com. But yeah, a lot of basketball in the past week or so.
Yeah, I'm going to see if John in the break, if we can get maybe to push Rick back a segment. If you're able to hold on and we can do that, I'd love to talk about the Charlie Hughes and Mullins and Jeffersonville. We had Sharon Wilkerson on yesterday, so we'll do some fancy moves in the breaks maybe, and you might see Kyle when we come back or hear him, and you might not. But don't forget, Indiana Sports Beat Radio brought to you by Boost Fundraising. If you know of any groups needing a fundraiser, Boost Fundraising is one of the most unique and user-friendly fundraisers around. Your team receives personalized fundraising pages for each team member, free team branded promo gifts shipped to each donor. Boost Fundraising does it all. Sports teams, marching bands, charity causes, and community groups. Just go to boostfundraising.com and be sure to enter the promo code COIL to receive a discounted fundraiser. We're back with more Indiana Sports Beat Radio right after this.
We'll be right back for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
In the market. Better yet, Kyle, do you have a few minutes?
Yeah, I can.
And Rick, just to start off, I just want to talk about the Charlie Hughes and Mullins and Jeffersonville, which Rick would be into probably.
Sure.
How about Fred?
Unbelievable. Did you know that was coming?
I had no idea.
Yeah,
I had no idea, but it's actually a perfect segue for him.
That's a lot of work, though, man. 6 classes.
I was thinking, I'm like, wait a minute. So he's gonna have to get up early in the morning now. He's going to switch from being a night guy to an early morning guy, drive across that damn bridge every day. Now, he does have the East End Bridge to use, so that's an advantage. But I'm like, wow, that is a lot of work because you have to be involved with the games they're covering. And I'm like, dude, you might end up working harder than you were. Kyle, I'm talking about Fred Calgill, a former or mentor of mine, where I started out at WLKY TV and CBS in Louisville. And it was an intern for him a long time ago. And I worked at the station. It was crazy. I was finishing school. I was down in New Albany at IUS that took taking summer school and doing that internship, and then ended up getting an on-air job with the internship, anchoring overnight news, which was wild because I'd be in class and one day and somebody would look at me and like, did I see you on TV last night? And I'm like, that wasn't me, man. I just had to pull my hat down. But yeah, he took the job as radio TV teacher at Jeffersonville because their former teacher who had come from Floyd Central just retired, and notice he went back to Floyd Central. So
really?
I don't know if he did that just to retire and get that. I'm like, whoa, boy, this is like college athletics, man. And then
I saw New Albany's the guy who did the New Albany. What's his name? He was doing their media stuff for a long time. I think he stepped down too, doing their radio stuff.
Well, now Lee Kelly.
All right, here we go, guys.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt.
He passed.
Here we go.
Co-Real Estate for additional information, 812-583-0919, or go to mystonecrestliving.com. That's mystonecrestliving.com for more details. This segment is brought to you by Reynolds Family Dentistry in Sellersburg. Welcome back to Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Welcome back, everybody, on this Wednesday. Hope all is well. You have officially passed the hump. We're brought to you by our good friends at Reynolds Family Dentistry in Sellersburg, where I spent my afternoon yesterday. Dr. J doing his fine work. It was one of the most least invasive procedures ever. It was awesome. And I'm like, yes. And then afterwards went over to Bubba's 33 with Roger Reynolds, and haven't been there for a while, but I've got some Bubbas for you, Ricky B. Rick Bozich from WDRB.com joining us, and Kyle Neddenriep was kind enough to stay over a few minutes with us. He was at the Charlie Hughes over the weekend, where I think the only top IU recruit there was Braylon Mullins, and he was the only high-end recruit there other than maybe a Xavier Robinson, but I can't think of who all was there. Kyle.
Yeah, I mean, Mullins was the attraction for sure. And he played up to it, I thought. I mean, everybody thought. I mean, he played really well throughout the weekend. Got a Kentucky visit and offer on Monday. What is today? Wednesday. So a couple days ago. He's also, I know he's supposed to go to Ohio State and Purdue this week. I can't remember which days those were, but I know both those schools were wanting to get him on campus. And I mean, I think at some point in the next month or so, probably about a month from now, he'll cut his list down to probably 5 to 7 schools, and be interested to see what that looks like. Certainly IU will be in that mix unless something changes dramatically, but they'll definitely be there. I would say I'll be curious to see kind of where these other national schools sort of fit in. His recruitment went from Midwest to a national within about a month. So it's pretty interesting. And he's supposed to go to North Carolina, UConn, so Kansas. So some of these places he's going to get a chance to see in person at some point, and then we'll see how it goes from there. But yeah, I got to think IU is going to be pretty significantly, I wouldn't say favored, but in that favorite mix going forward for sure.
And Rick, a couple of things that you will have interest in covering Southern Indiana. Kyle, you said you got a chance to see Noah Washington. Now, if you're not up to date on recruiting, you're not going to have to worry about him signing with anyone anytime soon, because I think he is in the 2063 class or something like that.
2028.
2028. Oh, yeah. That's up when Indiana football plays Notre Dame. That's a couple of years before that, I guess. But Noah Washington, a lot of buzz out of Southern Indiana. These kids like maybe 6'6" now, I think. He's going to be is he a freshman or a sophomore?
Will be a freshman.
Will be a freshman.
Yeah.
A lot of buzz about him. He's not Romeo Langford with the ability to get to the rim and beat people off the dribble like Romeo had, but a lot of skill, man, for a youngster.
Yeah, I had a chance to see two. Of course, his brother played. Caleb was at Floyd Central, graduated in 2023, now at DePaul. But Noah's and Caleb was very good. Noah's he's more of a perimeter player, like, a skinnier perimeter player, I would say. I was standing, they played North Central in one of the games. I think it was Sunday morning or Saturday morning. I was standing kind of behind the scores table, and I know all the North Central coaches pretty well. And, every time Washington, he had 3 points at halftime. Second half, he scored 21 points in the second half alone. And North Central won. They just have a better overall team than New Albany. But Washington was making all kinds of guarded shots. And the coaches are kind of like, man, this kid's a freshman. Who is this? This kid's legit, so in that, I just found that interesting how they sort of reacted to him. And, he's really good. I mean, I think you're right. I mean, he's not Romeo in that he's just going to, you're going to be blown away by athleticism and that sort of thing. Or, he's just a different type. So I hope those expectations aren't, totally blown out of proportion when he gets to New Albany this season. But people should be very excited, I would say, about what he's going to bring to the table for them. I think he's just very, like you said, he's very skilled, great touch from the outside. He's also had the benefit of getting beat up by his older brother and his friends who were 5 years older than him. So all those things kind of work in his favor to kind of lead up to a really good high school career for him. So I can't wait to see him play more. He's also, really easy to talk to type of kid. I thought, you never know, how, especially young men like that will do in interviews, but he was phenomenal. So yeah, I'm really first time really seeing him. I saw him once in Fort Wayne just for a little bit, probably a couple months ago. I was impressed with him there too, but chance to see him play a little more was good to see him. I think it's going to be a fun 4 years for him.
Rick, I know you've, or at least familiar with him. I doubt you've seen him yet, just because he's not played up in many events. But he's definitely going to be a name to be heard of for the next 4 years.
Yeah, I actually saw him warming up last weekend. My grandson played in a second grader league over at Scribner, and he was playing for an AAU team. And he was standing out among all the kids out on the court, and I'm pretty sure he's going to be at New Albany. I know there was a lot of concern during the winter that he'd be at New Albany because I think some of the Louisville private schools are trying to get him to come across the river.
Why? But he ought to be at Floyd Central, damn it. He's a legacy.
But the thing is that New Albany has supposedly a 7th grader who's even better, by the name of Karsten Studemeyer. He'll be an 8th grader next year. So New Albany should be really good in the next couple of years if they get both those kids and they play together.
It looks like
New Albany has they have a new coach. Well, last year he was a new coach, a guy from Kansas City who I've heard a lot of good things about, and Jeffersonville's also good. Aren't they going to be a top 10 team next year, Kyle?
They are a top 10 team. They may be number 1, brother. They just wiped out everybody at the Charlie Hughes.
Okay, there you go.
4 of the top teams in the state. They went 4-0 in the Charlie Hughes. They beat Lawrence North with the Xavier Robinson. They beat Carmel. They beat Greenfield Central and Braylon Mullins. And I always leave Fishers out.
They beat Fishers.
Fishers get that schedule, Rick.
Yeah, I mean, Sharon Wilkerson, that's, I think it was the 2nd season. So it's nice to see Sharon Wilkerson come back to his alma mater and get Jeff back. And, having grown up and having lived in New Albany during the glory days of the 90s when, even the 2000s, when every time Jeff and New Albany played, both gyms were sold out. It's nice to see those two teams get back to what it used to be and bring back, the community pride in both of those programs.
Yep, and Southern Indiana basketball. So it's cool to see that Floyd Central having been very good. Now they've got a relatively new coach with Fonzo Wright as well. So who came in, but yeah, Jeffersonville and Sharon was on with us yesterday. I mean, he has his eyes on being a college coach, Kyle, and Sharon has made his bones, man. He hasn't walked into this Jeffersonville job. He was at Logansport. He was then at Madison Shaw, which I had said yesterday was like being in the witness protection program. Then goes to Madison, which is one of the smallest schools in the Hoosier Hills Conference. Then he goes to Jeffersonville, his alma mater, and the success factor has been quick.
Well, he's got his team this year, and they made some noise at the end of last year by, what they did. They were, honestly,
5-4.
They were up 5 on Ben Davis with probably 65 seconds left in that game, and probably should have won that game. Ben Davis, was able to get out of there with a 1-point win against a really good Jeff team. But, they made some noise at the end, beat LN, that was an impressive win. Then almost beat Ben Davis, like I said. And they have basically, they lost one of their guards, but you bring back guys like Singleton, Cooper, and Douglas. I mean, those 3 are about as good as any trio in the state, I would say. I will say though, Fishers, out of respect to the defending champs, I mean, they were without John Anthony Hall when they played this weekend. He was on an official visit to IU. So, in fairness, that was, they weren't at full strength, but even still, I mean, Fishers are really good. They won all the other 3 games they played, and they've got talent all over the place, including Jason Gardner's son, who's going to be a sophomore. So, but regardless, Jeffersonville is going to be right in that mix. I mean, I was talking to Sharon about that. It's like now you have the target on your back. I mean, which is a little bit different than it's been. But I really do think this team is sort of well equipped to handle that sort of pressure. And walking out of the gym with them after they went 4-0, it's like you could just tell how much that meant to them. To come up here, where, I'm sure they get sick of hearing about all the talents up here, and they come out of there and smack everybody and go back with a 4-0 record. So it seemed more meaningful. The Charlie Hughes, you're not game planning, you're not watching film and all that. But at the same time, for a team like that, it probably means a little bit more. And I think from a standpoint of just sort of like, hey, we're a team to be watched this year, and they even said that. I mean, so I think it was pretty meaningful from that standpoint.
Rick, let's see what. Other than that is pretty much it on the that type of scene. But so, what are your expectations with the high schools, it still has the same bearing as it used to, but AAU has really kind of bled over it a lot. That, you know, it happened a long time ago, but is it more so now or less so than it was prior to the onset of NIL and all of this?
Oh, wow. I'd say it's more so. It's more so every year, I guess. The thing that's always difficult for me to watch is I started out at the Anderson paper back in the days when the North Central Conference was, you know, bigger than the Mid-American Conference in college basketball. Go to the Wigwam, go to Chrysler Fieldhouse, go to Richmond, go to Logansport, Muncie, all those places. And, you know, I was in the Wigwam when they were putting 8,000 or 9,000 people in there when Norm Held was coach and stuff like that. So, I mean, the community, the world has changed so much since then, and a lot of things are better. But I don't think the high school basketball scene for me isn't better because I got my start. I mean, I grew up in the Gary, Chicago area watching the East Chicago, Washington 1971 team. That was so good.
I'm not a fan of that team.
They beat the Super Hicks, man.
They beat Floyd Central, man. Oh, gee whiz.
But,
yeah.
you know, the thing that is so different now is, and it's more of a factor in Louisville than it is in Southern Indiana, is that kids, they change high schools pretty much, you know, two times in high school, and a lot. The best player in Kentucky either last year or the year before. I don't remember when he left. He left for his last 2 years of high school. It's a kid named Johnson from over in Versailles area to go to a prep school, and kids from Trinity sometimes leave and go to prep schools or other parts of Louisville. Louisville's best freshman last year, Caleb Glenn, had played at Male, which, you know, that's a historic name in Louisville, Male High School. And he skipped his senior year to go play at Lawlemure. D'Angelo Russell's another one. He skipped 2 years at Central to go play at a prep school. So it's hard. It's hard. I feel for high school coaches. They don't have the high school coach used to be the king of the school, and it's not that way anymore. I mean, I remember talking to Coach Shannon about the way things changed at New Albany, and he was so grateful that Romeo Langford stuck with New Albany for 4 years.
I'm sure he is. He was able to get that state championship on his resume. Rick Bozich is with us from WDRB.com. Kyle Neddenriep from the Indy Star. I appreciate you, my friend.
You bet. Good to see you guys. Good to see you, Rick.
Good to see you,
Absolutely.
Kyle.
Make sure you give Kyle a follow and keep up with all of his content covering the state.
He's great.
He does
a phenomenal job.
He is the best. We've got more coming up. Brought to you by Bubba's 33. I was there yesterday. It was good. Back with more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Rick Bozich right after this.
We'll be right back for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Ooh, it's warm in this studio today. Anything new happening?
Oh, never a dull moment. Huh?
I said, mercy. It's like as the world turns, these are the days of our life, like the sands through the hourglass. These are the days of our lives.
Yes, they are. It's a hot topic.
It's a stupid topic, but it's just, you put it. I mean, I agreed with virtually everything you said. It doesn't mean I don't think that he didn't get, and by he, everybody likes to say they. It's really a he. There's a one and a sidekick.
Right.
But he got it. To me, he got it. And I'll say this on the air. He got what he deserved. I said it on Dockett's show yesterday. He got exactly what he deserved. And you mentioned they were being hand-fed interviews and inside information, which is bullshit. And people that actually do it for a living, working every day on this beat, it was crap. And it's not right. And it's like they basically sold themselves out. And the other stuff that was probably there does not make it make the waters any less murkier. I think it makes it a little more murkier, as a matter of fact. But I won't have credentials this year, Rick. I said I may not get credentials this year.
Really? You were on dockets yesterday?
Yeah. Second time in like a month.
Somebody sent me some tweet he had or something. What did he's talking about it yesterday or today?
He was talking about that yesterday.
Okay.
Because by the time it kind of busted out during our show yesterday, so we didn't really talk about it much. Plus, I didn't know, I didn't have any really information, so there was no reason for me to talk about it. I didn't know enough, but once it became evident as to what it was, but Indiana just keeps on being Indiana.
All right, here we
And
go,
at the
guys.
Honda Pilots, HRVs, CRVs, Honda Ridgelines, payment free for 90 days. Or get 0.9% APR financing for 36 months on a 2023 Honda Ridgeline. Go to AndyMooreHonda.com and get more to your door.
This segment is brought to you by Hoosier Hanks East. Welcome back to Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Welcome back, Indiana Sports Beat Radio on this Wednesday, surviving the post-Tuesday storms that rolled through this area, which were pretty stout. Rick Bozich from WDRB.com with us, and yesterday, unless you were under a rock, and if you're an Indiana fan, you know that there was a big hullabaloo about a divorce between, in essence, Mike Woodson / IU basketball and I guess a collective of sorts that had been doing things for Indiana, and really it was more about that relationship. But there are things that make that murky with family favors that may have been granted, etc., which I'm not going to call anything out specific, but that just to me makes it murkier. And I'm like, that's a little, that's you're treading into some gray area there, man. And then I always wondered why Indiana wasn't doing these things. The fantasy camp that's put on by the people that put on the fantasy camps at Kentucky and Kansas and Duke and for the Yankees and all these other places. So that's not like that's difficult to do. I think Hoosiers for good and the yet to be conceived at that time Hoosiers Connect they were chasing the big fish and landing the big fish and getting what was going to be needed for Indiana. And they were filling this role while being fed information, given interviews first before anybody else. And I'll go back to a specific moment. Jordan Hulls had just landed the job that he has now as director of recruiting for Indiana. And Jordan has been a great friend of the show, had been on numerous times while he was in Germany. I've been working with him and his family on their charity, the Never Lose Hoop, and a golf outing for years now. And I had reached out because I knew what was coming. I'm like, all right, Jordan, I would like to have you on before anybody else. I said, I know that there will be people that reach out to you that say you need to come on with them first, but I hope you can come on with me. And I was trying to leverage a little bit of that because I wanted to have that first. And I was able to get that. Later on that the very next day I was unfollowed on X by a certain group, which I found more than humorous because I landed that interview. I guess it just cracked me up. I'm like, wow, Talk about pettiness. So that's part of what we're dealing with, in my opinion. It was also, they're tied directly to a site, an Indiana site. So they were, in essence, being fed this information, given this information, while the rest of the IU media was put at a disadvantage. And again, I think that is total BS. And Indiana put itself kind of in that position. And then what did Scott Dolson say during this meeting? That's one thing I haven't heard.
Yeah, you're right. There's a lot to unpack. There's a lot of different tentacles. All we know about the meeting is what one person said, and that's obviously Eric Pankowski. We don't know what Mike Woodson said or Scott Dolson. And you're right. There are a lot of questions. There are a lot of different ways to go about this. The first thing is, I agree with you that the extra access and information they were given did create an unfair playing field. It goes on at other places. But I'm not sure it goes on to the degree it went on in Indiana, of them knowing all the inside recruit information and having players available for not just interviews, but I mean long podcast interviews,
and having no reason to. There was no reason for it.
Right. And that was fine for as long as for them, for both sides, as long as it went on. And then obviously, when this last season didn't go the way most people thought it should have gone, other than apparently Mike Woodson, there was criticism, and there was criticism by, the podcast and by Brian Evans, and that led to the meeting, and that's led to what's happened in the last few days. But I guess my overall points on it, and I get the criticism of I know a lot of people aren't fans of the hysterics and the way they do things and their content and all that stuff, and I understand that. But to me, the two biggest points are, one, Indiana has a amazing habit of, whenever things start going good, to like self-destruct or cause negative publicity or make it look like it's dysfunctional in the world. And that's what this does. It's not a good look for Indiana for all this dirty laundry to be out there. And the second thing is, if it is indeed true that the reason that this is no longer to Indiana's benefit, after having them feel like it's been to their benefit for all these years, is because people were critical of the way the team played last year. That's kind of absurd, because anybody who's objective, first of all, anybody who's objective can look at last season and say it was not a success. Plenty of stuff to criticize. You can't get blown out by Auburn and Connecticut. You can't lose 3 times in Nebraska. You can't get blown out twice by Purdue. You can't get run out of the Big Ten tournament and say, yeah, that was a good season. That's
no, yeah, exactly. And a lot has been put on, well, look what happened in recruiting last year. Well, okay, but that same kind of effort should have been being made every offseason. Indiana did not have.
The effort was put in the NIL recruiting. They got one high school guy. They lost a player and gained a player. So I don't know. I'm not sure how much recruiting is actually involved in portal guys. I mean, it's transactional.
I was getting ready to say, when you have a guy like Umar Ballo who comes with an asking price, that's the recruiting aspect of it is kind of out, but that's neither here nor there. But yeah, it's kind of petty. But the funny thing is, I've said multiple times, the things that was going on, people think that they're losing all of these things. There was a fan fest, a fantasy camp. These things were not just invented, people. And I would be more than shocked if things just like that don't continue. It may not happen. I'm not sure that it happens this year because, but maybe there was enough
sponsor,
previous knowledge, and there was probably enough previous knowledge that if there could still be something this year, they just haven't heard that, and they didn't want to talk about it until Well, it was not their idea. It was not Indiana's idea for this to become public knowledge. And then that's another thing, why it had to become public knowledge. Why was this needed? There's not a lot that a lot of us didn't already know.
Yeah, we knew a lot of it, but we didn't know the parts of how it all went down. And there had been talk, I think, of Mike Woodson's daughters possibly, being involved with the hysterics and employment situations. And Eric said that I believe he said on the podcast that both of his daughters, correct?
From what I understand. Yes.
Yeah. So, it's just a look behind the scenes at some of the stuff that is going on in college athletics that is not really particularly flattering to anybody.
And I'm really wondering why it wasn't really just a meeting between Scott Dolson, because it goes beyond IU basketball, and it's going to continue beyond with just IU basketball. They
mentioned in the podcast they're going to keep doing stuff with the women's program and the volleyball program and the men's soccer program. So it'll be so much of their content though has been on the podcast with current
what
IU
sells.
Players.
What sells?
How is that going to be replaced? I'm very curious to see how that's going to happen.
Welcome to my world. That's what aggravates or did aggravate people like me who work hard to get those kinds of guests on. And it's like, man, I'd like to have somebody feed that to me, hand me that information. Boy, wouldn't that be great? Yeah, it would.
Yeah, I'll say this. I'm not defending that. I think it's wrong too. I'm on the wrong side of it, just as you are. Unfortunately, that's what happens in too much of today's media. If you watch the NBA draft tonight, and watch Woj or Shams have every pick before it's on the board, because somebody who's in some agency somewhere who probably works at the same agency as their representative is giving it to them. They're great reporters. Yes, they've worked hard to get where they're at. But when you've got somebody on the inside who's giving you everything, it's not a level playing field, and it stinks. And I can speak to that, having gone through coaching searches this spring at Louisville and Kentucky, trying to, get it first. Who's going to be the next Louisville coach? Get it first. Who's going to be the next Kentucky coach? Or when is a coach going to be fired? It's tough to do when it's not a fair playing field. And it's become worse through the years instead of better because of, on the national scenes, a lot of these writers and TV people have agents, and the agents take care of them.
That is the long and the short of it. We've got Rick Bozich from WDRB.com with us. He's got a great piece out talking about the incident. We'll call it yesterday.
I noticed you're steadfastly, there's some words you're not saying.
The incident, yes, that happened.
I admire your principles.
I can't help it, man. I can't help myself. But but you made so many good points. It's surprising that I again am surprised this was made such a public spectacle, but I don't know how Indiana expected anything less because of how it had been and the actions had been. Of course it was going to be that way. I don't know why it went down the way that it did. That's a little odd.
I'm sure Indiana wanted it to go down quietly and nobody would have even known about it. And that's not the way it went down because, the Hoosier Hysterics decided they were going to do a podcast about it. And once they did, it became public knowledge and it became a story. And I can just say that of the columns I've written, it's already among the top 10 columns I've written all this year in terms of page views, and it's going to probably climb up in the top 15. It's a hot topic in the IU world because of, because of the popularity of their podcast, whether you like it or I like it or not. is immaterial. It is a popular podcast, and also because there's so much interest in IU basketball, and there was so much frustration in IU basketball over the way last season ended, and people not liking the comments that Mike Woodson and Anthony Leal made about true fans. And this just sort of backs up that that's what they feel, that they shouldn't be criticized. And they're not living in the real world if they think that that people that follow IU basketball are going to sit there and say, yeah, it's great. Losing Nebraska 3 times, let's do it again.
Well, they'll certainly have the opportunity this year to reverse fortunes. And I don't know what the line will be, and we'll talk about that when we come back. But Rick Bozich from WDRB.com is with us right now, brought to you by the Fresh Fork. For those of you that are on the go, always on the run, well, the Fresh Fork can provide healthy, delicious meals at home without the hassle, with chef-curated, ready-made meals delivered right to your doorstep, proudly fueling IU athletes, and now available to you with a menu that's always fresh and diverse. From hearty proteins to fresh salads, the Fresh Fork empowers you to make better food choices without compromising. Order online and let the Fresh Fork help transform your lifestyle for a healthier way of living today at thefreshforkonline.com. Use promo code radio20 and get $20 off your first order. We're back with more from the Magic Man, Rick Bozich, right after this.
We'll be right back for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
In the market. Wow.
Hey, Rick, just a heads up. So normally we end in about 5 minutes, but we started late today. So, and you don't feel like you have to stay super extra long, but we're going another 20, 23 minutes or so.
Wow, is that much time left?
Yes, that's why I didn't pop in to break, but you went to break.
It always screws me up when I'm off.
How about if I go to like 10:35? Is that good?
It's excellent.
Okay.
And then you can just exit whenever, like we won't break again, Rick, so you can just exit however you want. Okay. And Jim, you can take us home.
Exit stage left.
All right.
What's your next project? Manna. Yesterday was manna from heaven.
NBA draft tonight. I'll be watching that.
Yeah. That's what I want to talk about. Should have Kentucky.
Waiting. Did it break while we're off the air who the IU team's playing in the TBT? The draw was at 10 o'clock.
Oh, yeah. It's a good thing to look at there.
Louisville's playing Bellarmine the first game.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see. Assembly Ball and the crew from Valpo.
Okay.
So similar situations, playing a lower tier in-state alumni base.
Where'd you find that?
I just went straight to the TBT. Boom. And it was
where's the draw? I'm looking at it.
It should the first thing that popped up for me was tournament bracket, but I was on Google.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Wonder who Purdue
plays Fort Wayne.
Oh, wow.
Arkansas plays Eberlin Drive, and Butler plays Fail Harder.
Okay, yeah, I see it now. Eberlin Drive is usually pretty good.
Yeah, they're a former champion.
Who's Kentucky? Shaq's going to be here.
Did you say Shaq? Why is his son playing?
Yep. Team Diesel, they're the number 1 seed in the Louisville Regional.
That's funny. Well, they got a sponsorship, huh?
And Jimmer Fredette has a team here too.
No kidding.
All right, here we go, guys.
Yeah.
And everything you need to make a gourmet meal at home. Or pick out a tomahawk steak or a grouper filet and enjoy it cooked to perfection in Chop Shop Steakhouse. Chop Shop, Market and Table, a part of the Wild Food Group, is your butcher, baker, and fish house, no matter where you live.
This segment is brought to you by The Ugly Grouper. Welcome back to Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Welcome back. It is Wednesday, Indiana Sports Beat Radio. Jim Coyle with you as always, and joined by the great Rick Bozich from WDRB.com, brought to you by the Ugly Grouper on Anna Maria Island, Florida. It's the place to be, whether you're already there or will be in a visit. Make sure you stop by. They've got great food, including locally sourced seafood, your favorite cocktails and craft beers, and live music every day. Just go to the Ugly Grouper online, or theuglygrouper.com for more information. Rick Bozich with us.
I got one thing I want to share with you, since we were talking about the whole media thing and coaches and all that stuff. But this is just on the same day that everything happened yesterday at IU. It was a great example of a different way of doing things at Kentucky. And as you know, John Calipari's gone. He's replaced by Mark Pope. Hadn't played any games yet, hadn't lost any games yet, hadn't been criticized. But after earlier in the year, sitting down with different stations and outlets for one-on-one interviews, he did a summer press conference. Imagine that. He knows there's interest in Kentucky basketball and people can come in and ask questions. And he did it for like a half an hour. He insisted that the sports information people serve cookies at the press conference. So there was cookies for the media. And then Eric Crawford was there for us, and he shared this with me, which it was public, so I have no hesitation sharing it. After the press conference part was over, Pope said, "Can we not do this part on camera?" In other words, this is just talking, because it's just you guys and me. You guys have a hard job. And the times when you guys say nice things about us, I'm going to be super hyped. But the times you guys are crushing us is going to be fine too. That's part of the deal. I get it. It's hard to turn over a product every single day, meaning in the media. But I'm super grateful for each one of you, because you're telling the stories of these kids. That actually is super cool. So thank you for doing it, and it's going to be fun. Can you imagine that?
So it's different. Kind of used to be like that. That used to be the way that it was.
Yeah, I know.
The relationships, that's another thing that this stuff causes, is it, or what it prevents, are relationships, good organic relationships. And it puts up more of a wall to me between media and the athletics department.
Well, I've said this before. I mean, I got my start when even Coach Knight had the locker room open. Denny Crum always had the locker room open. Joe B. Hall, Eddie Sutton, Rick Pitino, locker room open. Rick Pitino opened locker room at Louisville. Howard Schnellenberger opened locker room for Louisville football. Lee Corso. And when you actually get to go in the locker room and talk to people, you can actually do it on a regular basis, and they kind of know who you are and you're accountable. If they don't want to talk to you, they don't have to. I know there's more media now, but there's so much more control, and you're so limited who you get to talk to, that I know Jeff Brom because I knew him when he covered at Louisville. I knew Kenny Payne because I knew him when he covered at Louisville. I know Steve Alfeld or John Laskowski or some of those guys because I covered them at IU. It's not that way anymore. I mean, Lamar Jackson played here for 3 years. He wouldn't know who I am versus some dude, working at the laundromat. I mean, because they don't want anybody in the media to develop any relationships with these athletes. So that way they can control the message. And I think it's a bad strategy. I think it's beneficial for these young guys to learn how to deal with people and build relationships that can benefit them the rest of their lives. But that's not the way it's going.
No. And there's a lot less control over the players, though, because of NIL, fortunately. Right. So that's something that is actually a good part, because you can talk to these guys. It's like, hey, it's kind of,
if you pay them?
Well, you don't even necessarily have to. You can say, this is part of an NIL deal, if it really is. But they're free to basically talk to whomever they want, I would imagine now, because
but if you called up an IU basketball player on your own and said you wanted to do an interview, that would get shut down, man.
Well, but why? If it's part, is it written that if it's part of an NIL situation that it's not shut down?
I don't know. That's a good question. I would think they would say, I'm doing this interview, I'm getting paid for it, or they would clear it in advance. You just can't, you just can't call players up on your own and talk to them. You can, but they're going to take your credential away.
Yeah, I mean, and if you're doing that with regularity, absolutely. And there are many limitations, a lot of limitations as far as access to talking to. We go months without, hearing from guys, coaches and whatnot. And I don't know. I think that there should just be a little more regularity. And when the off season, that's fine. Make it once a month, but something to stay in contact. And instead of just shutting it down, and how it didn't used to be that way. And because everything is year round. It doesn't matter if it's football, basketball, every program is a year round program. And
the other part of it, Jim, is they have their own website and they share a lot of the best content on their own website, which I understand. It's their product. I understand that, but I don't think it's the right strategy to be so shut down on everything that people don't get a look inside of what some of a lot of these guys have great stories to tell, interesting stories that people that are fans would like to read. And I don't think a number of times they don't get told.
I agree wholeheartedly. Tonight, the NBA draft begins. Many area players, former players involved. Khalil Ware from Indiana, Zach Edey from Purdue, Reed Shepherd, and multiple others from Kentucky. I'm sure there are a couple of any Louisville guys, former Louisville guys in there.
No, there's no Louisville players this year. 4 Kentucky guys, and Khalil Ware's the local offering. It'll be at Shepherd of Kentucky is generally considered to be one of the top 3 picks, probably the first college player taken, which is astounding to me because, I mean, he didn't start except for 4 games at Kentucky. He came off the bench because of whatever reasons Calipari did that. And then the other one is Rob Dillingham, who also came off the bench. So Kentucky's 2 super subs are going to be taken in the lottery. But Ware is obviously the one that IU fans will be looking at. A month ago, I thought he was going to be picked in the 20s. I've seen a lot of mock drafts in the last week that have him in the end of the lottery, which would be great for him. I mean, I go back and forth on him. He does a lot of great things. I like the way he can shoot the ball, and he's a very versatile big man. But just even though he played harder last year than he did at Oregon, I'm not sure I've seen the NBA type motor you have to have from him yet. What do you think?
I think he picked up the pace when he got to Bloomington, and that level that he stepped up, but he's going to have to step up that same level again and
get physically stronger.
Yeah, but there are other guys that have had to go through that part of it. And I think it's just a learning process. He learned that, hey, I got to play harder. And then so now he's got to play harder yet. And it's a grind. It's not easy. If it was easy, everybody would do it. And it wouldn't be the elite of the elite that achieve that. So that's why you have to, you got to get after it. You've got to have that Trace Jackson Davis type effort. I didn't think that he was going to be a guy that actually made it, but he virtually willed his way into that position. And that's what Khalil Ware is going to have to do. Although he has a few other skills. Number one, he's 7 foot tall, but number two, he can step out and hit the long ball. Ruby.
Right. Ruby knows what time it is for her walk. So as I said earlier,
that's it, baby.
Time for me to get the shoes on and get going. Have a great week.
Rick Bozich from WDRB.com. Appreciate you, man.
Bye-bye.
See you next week. Always fun talking to Rick. But, talking about that. So the TBT schedule is out. Also, Assembly Ball. They will play. Where did I go? I just had it. I was trying to load it at the same time. Who did I say they play? Valpo? Yeah, Indiana Assembly Ball playing Valpo. The men of Mackey is playing Fort Wayne. Team Arkansas playing Eberlin Drive. And Eberlin Drive is in this bracket. Oh, wow. Really? they've got seeds next to these teams. Assembly Ball is the number 1 seed in the Butler Regional, the Hinkle Fieldhouse. Kind of unexpected. Minnemäki are the 4th seed. The Arkansas team is number 3. Fort Wayne's number 5. Butler number 2. All good dogs, as they'll take on the 7th seed, Fail Harder. Indiana gets to take on Valpo. Like I said, they're the 8th seed in this tournament. So that's how things will start. That happens on July 19th, 8 p.m., baby. Prime time. Minnemäki, their game is the same day. It's at 3 in the afternoon. Did you notice which team they put at prime time? It's not an accident. It's not an accident. They want the biggest crowd they can get. And I'm not sure at what level of TV this first round is going to be on. I know I saw something that said that it might be available to stream for free, which I would not understand the point of that. I'm like, why on God's green earth, if you're running an event where you want people to go, would you allow it to be live streamed for free? I mean, hell, I think that is a mistake, but that's my marketing mind talking. But that's the makeup of that regional. John Boy, we heard there's another regional down in Louisville, not far away, that you heard Rick talking about. Team Diesel, the number 1 seed, Shaquille O'Neal's son. That's pretty good deal. That's a pretty good sponsorship they have.
Yeah, and that Louisville regional that you mentioned has been paired up with Kentucky's regional. I believe their team is called La Familia. And they'll have their own team, so it'll be interesting.
Which one is La Familia?
Kentucky.
Oh, of course. So it's a mafioso.
It is
La Cosa Nostra.
Yeah, La Familia was something that I believe is, I don't know if it was from Calipari himself, but it's a Calipari.
Like I said, term. Mafioso.
Exactly.
Exactly. You're making my point for me, man. You're making my point for me. Louisville taking on Bellarmine. That's kind of cool, but I'm sure Louisville will be kind of loaded. They're the number 2 seed in that region behind Team Fredette, Jimmer Fredette. Man, Sideline Cancer is in that. I wonder if Mo Creek is playing.
I wonder if that includes our friend Maurice. It'd be really interesting to see if he chose to play with Sideline Cancer over the Hoosiers.
Well, he's been with them a long time.
Yes.
If he did, but I do not see him listed on their roster. So I don't know that he is. I would wonder if he's not playing somewhere, but he's also, I would think that he would be playing.
Yeah.
But I don't know. We'll have to reach out to him and find out. He's not on that roster currently. So, but hey, yeah, you're not far away from all of that stuff starting, man. A lot going on in the month of May. You've got the
July, you mean?
July, yes, sir. Thank you very much. You've got the AAU, both deals coming to a close. Their championships, the EYBL and the Adidas 3 SSB. Also, you've got the Brickyard at Indianapolis, the TBT at Hinkle Fieldhouse. It just continues. The Big Ten football media days. July is a busy back half of the month. Gee whiz, which feeds right into football fall camp. So no rest for the wicked or the weary, baby. But I'm looking forward to the TBT. It's always kind of fun. I have not been to a game live, so that's going to be cool. Getting to go back to Hinkle Fieldhouse is going to be cool. So there's you got that going for us, which is nice. Man, it's been a fun day so far, John Boy.
That's true. Still got about 5 more minutes with it as well.
Last night, John had his podcast that he does, Out of Touch, and I happened to click onto a clip that they ran that I watched the whole thing, and I watched it again. I'm like, what the hell is going on there?
It's nonsense.
Tell.
Every couple of episodes.
That I did gather. I was able to surmise. That is the only thing I was able to surmise.
Every few episodes, we do a segment called Town Name Trivia, which is just, something goofy I came up with. And we're going through each of the states, and both Dustin and Mitchell, I give them 2 questions, if you will. And the question is really just, I give them a real town name in the state that we're talking about and a fake one. And they're usually very obscure town names, and they have to guess which one is correct or is the correct name. And if they're wrong, then one of them gets punished for the next episode. So for example, if you watched our episode where we did Florida town names, Mitchell was our big loser, and he lost trying to cheat, which is even worse.
I kind of picked that up. I just didn't know what was being cheated on.
He has to intro our next episode. So that's what he has to do as his punishment.
You got to train him young. Train him young.
Oh yeah.
Let's see. Who's planning on going to TBT? Anybody going to the Brickyard? Chase Briscoe, Mitchell, Indiana product right down the road. Going to be changing teams next year, going from Stuart Haas, the team formerly, it still is until the end of the season, I guess, owned by Indiana legend Tony Stewart. He is getting out of the NASCAR business. He is having a baby, by the way, though. So congratulations to him. Saw that as well. So all kinds of stuff going on, man. But nothing bigger than the draft tonight. Where does Khalil Ware land? Where does Zach Edey land? Again, both of these guys, I think they're outside the lottery. They both have 2 completely different games, and it is not for me to say what will work for a team if these teams have GMs and they have studied and studied and studied and talked to coaches and talked to any and everybody, and they know what their offense is. They know what they're trying to do. So if they think, say, a Zach Edey can fit into that, then they're going to draft him, because the minute you draft somebody, you're dropping some major change, whether it works out or not. If you're dropping a first round pick on somebody, you're going to drop some serious coin. So they have studied these things, and it's not just pulling the number out of a hat. I'm just very curious to see where both of them land up. And yes, Ross, I mentioned that at the top of the show, but I don't think I was on the air when I talked about it. The NCAA has taken marijuana off the bad boy list. Remember when, if they failed a marijuana drug screen, guys got a 1-year suspension. Then it was a half a year. Then it was whatever. Then it was 3 games. I mean, it's just so funny how this is like something that was being treated as a felony, which actually it was listed as like that by the federal government just up till 3 weeks ago, when the DEA took it from a Schedule 1 to a Schedule 3, which is now it went from being like heroin and cocaine to, I don't know, cough medicine or souped up cough medicine or something, which is the proper way. It was, again, one of those stupid things that should have been done a long time ago. Some of the things that have been focused on and cared about, dumb. People have opinions about a lot of things, but they don't have a ton of knowledge behind those opinions. Too often, opinions are developed off of lack of or false information. So there's that. There is that. Man, it has been a fun one today, and it will be a fun one tomorrow, John Boy. I know we've got Shannon Griffith joining us. We'll talk some Indiana football as we get closer and closer to Big Ten football media days, 3 days of it from Lucas Oil coming up in July. Shannon Griffith joins us tomorrow to talk about that. Who else is on the docket, John Boy?
Chris Denary will be with us. I'm sure he'll give us his insights on what the Pacers do in tonight's NBA draft first round. They do have one of the final picks, so it's not expected to be somebody of note unless something wild and wacky changes. So you'll hear from Chris on that.
News.
And then we may also hear from Travis Miller potentially. So we'll keep that on the
and we may have another surprise or so. So
yeah.
You should never be surprised about that. But looking forward to it. As always, cannot thank everyone enough for today. Big thanks to the King, Rick Bozich, Kyle Neddenriep from the Indy Star, Dylan Sinn from the Fort Wayne Journal-Gazette. Most importantly, thanks to each and every one of you. For those of you listening on 1380 The Fan, stay tuned for the Sports Rush up next. And if you're listening on 97.7 The Ref, just keep it right here, as well as the same for WJOB. Keep her tuned right where she is. We're back to do it again tomorrow. Until then, I'm Jim Coyle. I will see you on the radio.
Thanks for listening to Indiana Sports Beat Radio. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube page for more clips and team coverage of Indiana basketball, football, and more. You can also find full episodes and tons of other content on thehoosier.com. We'll see you next time for another edition of Indiana Sports Beat Radio.